Welcome to this session where we're going to look at the requirements for the assessment task for Unit Standard 20469, Evaluate Adult Learning Sessions. Now, if you're completing this as a part of your trainer course, National Certificate in Adult Education and Training, then this will probably be the last assessment that you'd look at completing. But it's certainly an assessment that you would get a good overview of before you actually start any of your training, because while it may be assessed at the end, you'll need to make sure that you plan for it. So what you'll need for the session is a copy of your 20469 assessment booklet in front of you. It should be a staple booklet that you have in your trainee pack. So if you don't already have that in front of you along with a pen, then please just take a moment to go and grab it, and then once you have it in front of you, we can continue looking at the assessment. Okay, so you've got this in front of you. Let's have a look at this assessment task and what it is that you need to do. So I've got an electronic copy in front of me here, just so we're both looking at the same thing. So you'll see on the front cover there, 20469, Evaluate Adult Learning Sessions. Now you'll see from this standard, it's a level 5 standard and it's 5 credits. Now level 5 is an academic level. It's equivalent of first year university, and it's 5 credits that count towards the National Certificate in Adult Education and Training. Now this standard is also really important because it also can contribute to your National Certificate in Adult Education and Training Level 5 as well. So if that's a qualification that you're looking at attaining, then having this standard will be very helpful. So let's have a look at what you need to do. Well, the very first thing you need to do is just to complete the section on the front of your assessment task. Your surname here, your first and middle names here. It would be really helpful for us if you put your date of birth in that box and your gender. If you know your NSI, it's your National Student Index or NZQA number, then please write it in there. If you know you have one but you can't remember it, that's okay, you can leave that blank. So long as we have your date of birth, then we can probably track you down in the system. And lastly, over here is just the organisation that you are employed by. And that's all you need to do on the front cover. So once you've completed that, then let's have a look at the instructions and conditions on page 2. You'll see here's the learning outcomes that are associated with this standard. People credited with this unit standard are able to demonstrate knowledge of learning session evaluation aims and methods, prepare for the evaluation of adult learning sessions, implement and analyze learning session evaluations, and review the evaluation process. All activities that you complete for this assessment must comply with the Human Rights Act, Privacy Act, Official Information Act, and Health and Safety in Employment Act. Okay, so just keep that in mind. As the assessment will be completed in your workplace, your organisation and or industry's health and safety policy procedures must be followed at all times throughout the assessment. Your manager is going to verify that you actually met that requirement. And assessments providing evidence must be real. Okay, so we want this to be based on actual real training that you actually did deliver in the context of your normal work or training programs. Okay, if you're doing role plays or simulations that may not be appropriate, please advise Edbiz if that's the case, and we can clarify whether or not that will be suitable for this assessment. Anything that you don't understand, have any difficulty reading, please contact Edbiz. And there's an assessment due date for this task. If you are not sure of what the due date is, please contact Edbiz, because if your assessment is not due before the assessment due date, it may not be marked. Okay, so you may need to apply for an extension if something comes up. We can't guarantee that your extension application will be approved. It depends on the circumstances. So just be aware of that. It's really important as part of your planning that you schedule enough time in to complete this assessment task to make sure it's in before the due date. So let's have a look at the instructions. In this assessment, you need to demonstrate you're able to evaluate adult learning sessions. So it's all about evaluation of training. Now, sufficiency for this unit standard is evaluation of 3 different learning sessions where each session is at least 30 minutes. Now, if you're doing some other assessments at the moment with Edbiz, you may have heard this requirement before. It ties in with many of the adult education and training unit standards. So what you might be picking up on, hopefully, is that you could use this assessment combined with the other 2 or 3 that you may be doing with Edbiz at the moment. So what I'm saying is that, well, for all of your 3 other sessions that you have to do some evaluation. So the evaluation you do could be used for 20469. Okay. So we don't expect you to come up with another 3 separate sessions all over again. They can be the same 3 sessions. So let's just have a look at what you need to do. There's the pre-assessment interview and check sheet. You don't have to worry about filling that in or completing that. That's on page 3. Just leave that blank. If you go to page 4, let's have a look at task 1 and what you need to do for task 1. The overview says, for this task you're required to complete a short written assignment to demonstrate your understanding of the importance of evaluation of adult learning sessions and how sessions can be evaluated. Your evidence for this can be handwritten, or you can do it on a word processor. Okay. In either case, your assessment evidence must have your name, date, and assignment details on each page. So here's the instructions for part A of task 1. You need to explain at least 3 aims for why we write adult learning, for why we evaluate, adult learning sessions. So up here it's just reminding you that our aim is a general statement of intent. All right. So what do we mean by this? What are we trying to achieve? Now, your answer to this question, or to meet this requirement, 3 key aims, you're expected to write a paragraph to explain each aim using examples to support your explanation. Now, being a level 5 standard, a little bit of research is expected here. So I really encourage you to use any reading material that you've been provided with, or to go on the internet, looking at things like, for example, Donald Kirkpatrick's levels of evaluation is a very good resource. So you could Google that. That's Kirkpatrick's levels of evaluation. Could be useful. And any other learning that you've learnt in the Edbiz course, or that you can get in books, journals, off the internet. Now, being a level 5 assessment, some research is expected, but also making sure that you reference any information that you research as well is expected. So all you're doing here is saying, well, what's 3 key aims, or what's 3 key reasons why we evaluate our learning sessions. Now, off the top of your head, you can probably think of 1 or 2, all right, at least. Now, you need at least 3. Okay, so just keeping in mind that you should be doing a little bit of research for this, jumping on the internet, reading some journals, or reading textbooks, all right, any other resources that you may have access to answer that question. Make sure you've referenced any research that you've done. Part B. There are many methods that can be used to evaluate learning sessions. Now, select any 4 from below and write a brief paragraph to explain the features of each method. Alright. So I've got in there in brackets what I mean by that: a description of the method, of how it's applied, and its advantages. So look, here's several here. So you can select from any 4, or you may have others. So one way, or one method of evaluation, is to get our peers to observe us and give us feedback. So it could be a colleague, could be your manager. That is one method of evaluation. Self-reflection is another method of evaluation. Getting feedback from your learners, having structured interviews, getting third-party feedback, so having someone from outside of your organisation come in and maybe observe you and give you some feedback. And there's lots and lots of others as well. Now you must select 4, and in a brief paragraph for each of the 4, talk about how the method is applied and its advantages. So how do you do peer observation feedback? How do you actually do it? And what's the advantages of that? Then you might pick, well, learner feedback. How do you get feedback from your learners? And what's the advantages of getting feedback from your learners? Now you must have 4, remember, and we're expecting at least a paragraph for each one. So some decent writing. So a paragraph, you're kind of thinking, hey, look, well, at least four sentences that tie in together, that make some sense. Putting in a little bit of research in there is going to be really helpful. Remember, this is a level 5 assessment, so some research, some sources of information other than from out of your head is going to be helpful. So you've got 4 paragraphs there that answer part B, and remember you've got 3 paragraphs here that talk about 3 key aims. Those are just short paragraphs. Okay, these are a bit longer, these paragraphs for part B. Okay, so if you're typing that up, I should be expecting from you at least 2 or 3 pages of typed up notes, okay, or handwritten notes. So in terms of quantity, that's what we would be expecting there, and I would be expecting to see at least 2 or 3 different sources of information that you use to answer those questions. Alright, so first part is about identifying the aims and methods of evaluation. Task 2 is about actually evaluating. So you have to evaluate 3 sessions, and for each session you must use 2 different evaluation tools. Now what I mean by that, if I just go back, these are examples of tools. Being peer observed, doing self-reflection, getting feedback from your learners, getting someone from a third party coming in to give you feedback. So for each session you have to use 2 different tools, or 2 different methods. So for example, for session 1 you might use learner feedback, and that could be tool A, and your learners might complete an evaluation questionnaire or learner feedback questionnaire that's given to the learners at the end of that session. The second tool, for example, could be feedback from your observer, or it could be your own reflection on what you thought worked really well, what didn't work so well. Okay, so you must use 2 different tools, alright, in that session. Now check this out, you have to do the same thing again for session 2. Now you could use for session 2 the same tools that you used for session 1. So you could say, well, hang on, off the tool A, I'm just going to get my learners to review it. Tool B is I'm going to do some personal reflection. Alright, I'm going to think what worked, what didn't work, and what I could improve for next time. Alright, so don't think that you have to come up with 6 different tools. You don't at all. You can if you want, but you could just simply use the same tools you use for session 1, use them for session 2, use them for session 3. Okay, here's examples of tools here. Okay, so there's lots of things you can use. Alright, now first of all you need to identify the learning session needs and requirements of stakeholders though. You can't just jump in and say, well, I'm going to use our organisation, or we're going to use learner feedback sheets, and I'm going to use self-reflection at the end of my sessions. You need to make sure that whatever tools you're going to use reflect the needs and requirements of the stakeholders. So it's no good asking the learners in their evaluation form whether or not the food was good or not if that was not one of the needs and expectations that they have of the training. So there are some questions that we can ask, or things that we can reflect on, or things that can be observed in our training that may not actually reflect the needs of stakeholders. So what you're going to need to find out before you do the training is, hey, well, what is it that my learners really are looking to get out of this training session? All right, because other things that I'm going to want to ask them at the end of the training to find out were those needs met. All right, what are the needs of my organisation and requirements of the organisation in terms of how I deliver it? If I'm having one of my peers observe me, or even getting my learners to provide feedback, what are some of those key things that my organisation measures me against that's important to include in my evaluation? So this is what we mean by this part here. Clarify what needs and requirements of at least 2 different stakeholders are and how you're going to cover them in your evaluations. For example, the delivery mode that you use, the kind of teaching styles you use, the pace of the learning, the relevance of the learning outcomes. Okay. So you just need to write something there, provide some written evidence to tell Edbiz how you clarified what those needs and requirements were. You might have talked to your supervisor, you might have talked to your learners, you may have referred to your organisation's policies and procedures. Any of those 3 or all of those 3 you may have used, just to give you some guidance on what kind of things you really need to evaluate. So you can handwrite your answers, or type them up on a word processor, right? You need to also attach evidence to show how you have engaged with at least 2 different types of stakeholders. All right. Was it a pre-training interview or meeting that you had with your learners, and you might have sat them all around and say, hey, look, well, next week I'm going to be delivering some training on this topic, on this session. And what are some things that you're hoping to get out of it? You'd like to cover. What are your needs in there? What do you really need to learn about, and how do you want to be able to learn that? You might sit down with your supervisor and say, hey, look, what kind of things are really important to make sure that are covered in this training session that need to be or be useful to be evaluated. So it can be done through emails, through interview notes, through meeting minutes, but you're going to need to attach those as well. You're going to need to make or describe how you checked or made sure that each evaluation tool covered the key aspects, all right, of the training session. So how did you check and make that evaluation tool? And how did you make sure that whatever the evaluation tool is, whether it's a questionnaire that you created, or a self-reflection exercise, or an observation check sheet that you used, how did you make sure that it actually covered the key aspects of the training session? Key aspects could include the presentation style, how you presented it, the learning outcomes, the resources that you used. So again, now what you should be writing at least a decent paragraph for in your answers for A and B. Okay. Now, what you've done now is you've been able to describe the aims and the methods of evaluation. You've been able to put together a couple of evaluation tools for each session based on the needs of stakeholders, and you've established those needs by meeting with them, talking with them, getting information from them. Task 3 is all about putting it into action. Alright, so in this task you're required to explain the aims and methods of each learning session, and then use the evaluation tools for at least 3 different learning sessions, at least 30 minutes. Remember, you must use 2 different evaluation tools for each session. Alright, so for part A, for each training session, describe how you explained the aims and objectives of your evaluation tools. So what we mean by that is that you might say somewhere in your training session to your group of learners, okay guys, I'm going to hand you around an evaluation tool at the end of the training, or on a few minutes. Really keen to get your feedback, because I want to make sure that that if we deliver this again, that we do it in a way that's going to reflect the needs of the learners. So your feedback's really valuable to how we are going to make improvements. So answer these questions on the evaluation sheet and hand it in to me. So this is what I mean by describe how you explained the aims and objectives of your evaluation tools. So how are you going to cover that, or how did you cover that for each session? Part B, attach copies of the completed evaluation tools. So it could be copies, photocopies, or scanned copies of the evaluation forms that your learners completed. A scanned copy of your reflection activity at the end of each session. A scanned copy of the observation check sheet that may have been used by a peer who watched you deliver the training session. Alright, make sure each form clearly identifies which training session it relates to. And part C is have a look at that feedback that you got and review the results of the evaluation and suggest how delivery could be improved. So read through the feedback you got for your learners on session 1, on session 2, session 3 for example. What are they saying to you? How could the training session be improved? Look at the feedback you got, for example, if one of the methods you used, one of the tools that you used was peer feedback, peer evaluation. What's your peer saying? How could your training session be improved? So again, you're going to write at least a really decent paragraph for each of your training sessions on that. Now the last part now is task 4, is you just have to review the whole evaluation process. Look, did the evaluation process work for you? Was it effective? So for this one here, I need you to describe how each tool that you used, how effective it was. Did it meet the outcomes? So for example, if your learners completed the evaluation tool but perhaps they didn't give enough information because their answers were too brief, or they forgot to turn it over and answer the pages on the back, then you could say, well, actually that tool wasn't very effective. I didn't really give me the information I was looking for. Maybe the questions were worded poorly, and so your learners, when they actually responded to the questions in the evaluation form, maybe they didn't give you the right kind of information because they misinterpreted the question, or they didn't know how to answer it. So that would be an example of where perhaps the evaluation tool perhaps didn't quite meet the outcomes. Or it could be the other end of it, other side of the coin. Perhaps it worked really well. The evaluation tool that you used really gave you some useful information, and that it met all the outcomes, the things that you were trying to achieve from using it in the first place. In either case, you have to try and think about, well, if you're going to use that evaluation tool again in the future, what would you do to try and improve it and make it better, easier for participants or stakeholders to complete, easier for to make sure that you've actually captured that key information. So again, you're writing probably a decent paragraph for each evaluation tool that you used. If you use the same 2 evaluation tools for each session, then you're only going to write it twice. Okay, so that's probably an advantage of using the same evaluation tools for each session. Alright, so once you've done that, that's all the hard work done. You just need to present that to your manager and just have a bit of discussion around what you did, how it all went, your thoughts. And your manager just has to have a look at what you've done and just sign off that it was your own work, that it reflects your organisation's policies and procedures, and complete that page there. Now, just to make sure you're sending in the right stuff back to Edbiz, here's a bit of a check sheet here on this page, page 9, in terms of what you should be sending in. Now just remember, always keep a copy for yourself, because if something happens and what you send in gets lost in the post, then you've always got a backup copy. And please don't send it to that address. Alright, send it to the address that is in your course participant handbook, okay, which will be a Hamilton address in Te Rapa, okay, part of the AMS group. So please don't send it to that address. Send it to the address that's in your course participant handbook. Now the post-assessment review, don't worry about that. We complete that. The same with the post-assessment check sheet or checklist. You don't have to worry about any of those there on pages 10, 11 and 12. Page 13 and 14 is the assessment schedule. This is the marking guide that we use to work out if what you send in to us actually meets the requirements. So you've got these evidence statements which tell us what it is that that should be in front of us to mark. And then the judgment statements, how good what you've sent in to us needs to be. Okay. So it'd probably be quite useful for you just to refer to this, just so you see what it is we're going to be marking you on. Okay, cool. Some model answers there too. So hopefully you've now got a much better understanding of what you need to do to complete the assessment for 20469. Hopefully you can see how it might tie in really well if you're also currently doing at the moment the other assessments for that require you to deliver 3 separate training sessions, and that you could easily integrate 20469 with those other 2 or 3 assessments that you're doing. If you've got any questions around this that you need to have clarified, then please contact us at Edbiz, give us a phone call or send us an email, and we'll be really happy just to talk you through in terms of how that may fit in with your context, and any help that you may need to be able to complete this assessment task. So I hope that all makes sense. Good luck, best wishes, and we look forward to receiving your assessment portfolio.